Today I have the awesome adventure of interviewing Michelle de Swarte, such a fantastic human being, such a fantastic woman, and we talk comedy and drama and acting and authenticity and Botox and modelling, and you know how when it gets really good, then sometimes you get so busy and the anxiety piles up, so we can spend so long waiting to get there. What do you do when you're there? A bit like all those movies, they just show the couple getting together. They don't show how did that couple become a really good relationship over time, so it's really fantastic talking to her, and Gloria Steinem and visiting Gloria's house. Such a wonderful, authentic woman. I was very, very lucky because I went to see Michelle do her stand-up in Brighton. She opened brilliantly in Brighton, and I was blown away. It was like a thunderbolt, because she was so embodied and powerful and there and cool and fantastic and vulnerable and open and real. And I thought, oh my God, you're the best thing ever. And being the cheeky person that I am, I wrote to her and said, I'm blown away by you. I do a podcast. Would you consider being interviewed by me? And what a generous being, because she's literally chocker at the moment with Press for the Baby on HBO coming out in June. Amazing show. And writing another show for herself that she's starring in and writing, and then doing stand-up at night. So very, very generous woman that she fitted me in as well into her busy life. So I hope you really enjoy it. It was just brilliant and enlightening and full of interesting, diverse things about, is it still the lighter black people that get the roles in telly? Do the darker black people get the same opportunities? Or, compassion for women who've been through difficult times? Or how do we navigate different places in life? So and also Botox doesn't last. I know this probably is known by lots of people, but I didn't know all this stuff. So yeah, I loved it. She was amazing. She is amazing, and I wish her so much success. Thanks. Wishing you all love. So welcome, Michelle.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to hear. I am cheeky as all out, and I approached you, Michelle, because I saw you gig in Brighton, and I just adored your absolute no waste of space comedy. Right? It was like boom, boom, hit the note, hit the note, hit the note, hit the note, and I also adored. I've just been listening to you talk about fashion with Kiri and McLean Pritchard, and I just adored also. You were in jeans, tall woman. You took space. You were in your space, and I'm like, oh my God, like being hit by a tornado. I'm like, oh, the woman is on fire. So I just want to say thank you, because I wrote to you and you wrote straight back and agreed to be interviewed. I'm just very grateful, very grateful.
Listen, the pleasure's all mine, and I get asked to do a few podcasts over Instagram, direct messages, and everyone's really surprised when I write back and say, "Yeah, go on then. If I've got time, I'll do it." And especially, especially if it's a woman. So, my pleasure.
I'm so grateful to you. It means so much, and I've, listening to you, you've also done like series on Vice, and you've done series also with Gloria Steinem.
I know. Can you imagine?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was amazing.
Oh my goodness.
She was our producer for a series called Woman on Vice.
Yeah.
And the highlight was after the end of the series, which got nominated for an Emmy. And I can't remember if it was before the end but anyway, we got to go to her house, and it was like one of the best days of my life.
What was that like?
It was amazing. And her house is so great. And like, it's such an eclectic mix of all of her travels and her time spent on the earth. And she's so generous with her space. And it was just so nice to see a woman of that stature and that age just being so transparent and so welcoming and letting you sort of see what her lifestyle was like. And what I loved about it is that she had this tiny kitchen in this flat on the Upper East Side. And
Wow.
she said that she never cooks and she's got no interest in it. And I just thought it was so funny. It was just so nice. You know what I mean? She was so, I can't lie. I was in her bathroom just like looking at all of her skin products and stuff. And I told her after, I was like, I saw some hair in your brush and I thought, I'm going to have that. And she went, don't you dare, I need it.
That is just so awesome. And you know what it speaks to? It's really inspiring, because it's like, it speaks to so much, you know, we've only got so much energy, and it's like, where do you put it? And she put it into what she put it into. She didn't put it into cooking. She put it into her life. But also it speaks to, you know, there's vulnerability is a superpower, right? Being open, being transparent, which I really experienced with you. It's a superpower that it takes people quite a bit to get to, because understandably we come from a world where you got to protect, you got to hide. And like, to hear that she let you in, you experienced her home, you see her world.
Yeah. And all of her photographs and stuff, she was just so welcoming. She let us all ask questions. She let us all take pictures. We sat in a circle. We had a good chat. And what I loved about it was, I think it got to about midnight, and then she was like, right, that's it, bye. And I was like, oh,
boundaries.
She was like, and now I'm done. Everyone can piss off. Can I swear?
Yeah, totally.
She was like, everyone can piss off now. I was like, I just loved her even more.
I love it.
Made me want to stay.
I love it, because this is the thing, right? It's a bit like relationships, marriage, or even being a woman, or even being a woman of color. And it's like, if people, how do you do that? How do you be who you be? And if you have someone who can model vulnerability, openness, sharing, kindness, open-heartedness, and the boundaries, it's like, I know what to do. There's the map.
It's so important, isn't it? And it takes so long to be able to learn.
That's right.
To do that in a way that doesn't make you feel bad for doing it. And it's like, if you want to give your best, you need time to recoup. Otherwise, you end up making yourself sort of so accommodating that you no longer exist.
That's right. It's very special to have your energy. And part of that is knowing your limits, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been really lucky to be around some really amazing women that have shown me how to do that. Like Catherine Ryan's another great example.
I love you in The Duchess. I love her in I love that show. It's so well written. How did you two, obviously maybe it was on comedy nights. How did you connect? How did you
I met Catherine like a decade ago, and my agent at the time, I was in Edinburgh, and she took me to go and see her show. And I was doing a TV show. I was in development with a TV show on Channel 4, which got axed like in the middle of the series, because to be honest, it was kind of crud. But anyway, you live and you learn, right? So
you were getting into telly pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, right, is I was living in New York, I was modeling, and I was doing TV presenting, and I was just getting into stand-up, but I had like a bit of buzz about me. And it was at a time where sort of TV were trying to tick a lot of boxes. And I say that because it's important that we're inclusive, but it's important that you put the right people in the right jobs at the right time, right?
I get it.
You know, so anyway, so we were looking around, and I was taking I was being taken to shows. It was my first time in Edinburgh. I'd seen Catherine. I absolutely fell in love with her, and I really wanted her on the show. And she was on the show, and she was great. And it was kind of at the beginning of her TV career.
Which show was that?
It was called The Dirty Digest, and it was on Channel 4, right?
Yeah.
And it was like a topical celebrity news show.
Okay.
And so it was on, got axed, but absolutely massive fan of hers. So I go back to New York. I sort of like, you know, the career that I thought I was going to have in London absolutely crumbled. I went back to New York, and I thought a really good producer at the time, actually, called Jack Bales, sat me down, and he was like, you know what, Michelle, there's two ways to go about this. You can do it the easy way, which is sort of like presenting or reading auto cue. But he was like, you're funny, but you're going to have to, you know, learn your craft. You can do it the hard way, and it's going to be more rewarding for longer, but it's the scenic route, right? And I really took that on board. I was like, you know what, you're right, because I'd done a bit of stand-up on TV, but I didn't have more than 10 minutes of stand-up. Do you know what I mean? I was I don't have, and so it's kind of not fair what they do or were doing at that time as well, which is like, we need a woman. Oh, great, she's a woman of color. We're going to put her on this show, and she's going to be next to seasoned comics, male white comics that have been doing it for 20, 30 years. And then you're going to wonder, why does this woman not seem that funny? And it's like, well, she's been doing it a fraction of the time.
Really good.
Right?
Yeah.
So I went back to New York and I continued to do stand-up. I sort of renewed my model visa and started working for Vice and just kind of got good in private. Then I moved back here 3 years ago. And again, I'd kind of like napalm my life, as it were. I was, you know, just got divorced. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to start again. Came back to London, but I was like, I am good at stand-up at this point. Went and did the Edinburgh Fringe. Oh, so funny, Catherine Ryan's texting me now.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that.
Excuse me, went and did the Edinburgh Fringe, did a free show. It was okay, no one came because I didn't have any buzz about me. I hadn't been in the country. Left the Fringe, was really like, what am I going to do now? I'm back in the country. I was staying at my sister's in my niece's old bedroom in a single bed, about to turn 40. And I was just like, for fuck's sake. And then I got this email from Catherine just being like, will you try out for the Duchess? I tried out on the Wednesday. I sent a tape in on a Wednesday. They called me back on the Monday. Before I'd even left the chemistry read and got on the tube at Farringdon, Catherine had texted me and was like, they're going to offer you the part. And then like a week after that, I was on set.
Oh my God. Oh
my God. How amazing.
I love that story.
I know.
I love that story. And it's so cool. I've been watching it, obviously, just been getting it. It's so cool. It's brilliant, tight, funny, dramatic. Lovely jeopardy and lovely tension, and but it really works. All the tension, it's just funny, isn't it?
I mean, she's an amazing writer, and what was so good about that, and why it's so important to have like, you know, just female allies, right? Is that while I was on that show, she introduced me to her agent, and she was like, Michelle, this is going to be your new agent. And I was like, I was so embarrassed, and I didn't end up signing with her agent, but I did sign with United. And she was really instrumental in that. And then after that, I got the baby. So, and then she put me on her backstage with Catherine Ryan. So I have to say, Catherine Ryan has been massively instrumental in where I am right now.
We need each other. We need each other. And, you know, I love talking to people about their lives. And you find that there were moments when somebody went alongside someone and helped, right? Yeah. We just kind of, we need those supports, which reminds me, you know, in New York, because I heard you interviewed about talking about women comics in the UK being slightly kind of apologetic and twee, and an American female, I don't know, I may be repeating you in the wrong way, so just correct me, but American women comics being bam, bam, bam. I don't know if you'd speak to that. And so I wondered if, you know, you found that, if that's something I'm repeating in the right way. And also there's other people like Gina Yashere who went to America, and whether you got to know other women from the UK who went to America, or, you know.
I didn't. I've never met Gina Yashere, and I'm such a big fan, and I wish I had. And I think that, to, I guess, reiterate that point, I don't think that stands as far as Black female comics. I think in
the UK, so Black,
in the UK,
you find them more like.
I feel like they take up a lot more space on stage.
Anyone you'd name? Because I know.
I mean, I think Judy Love. I think Tanya Moore.
Yeah.
Athena.
Yeah.
That just spring to mind, right? Annette Fagan.
Yeah.
An absolute comedy force.
So,
and I grew up watching Gina Yashere, who is outstanding and amazing. And in America, across the board, in what I've found, maybe I shouldn't say America, but in New York, which is primarily where I did stand up.
Yeah.
Everything was a lot more mixed, right? So even in terms of, I had a circle of female comics, Black female comics, just female comics of color, right? and we would all gig together. Whereas here, it's a lot less likely to happen that we're going to cross paths. There's not as many of us here, and there's just not as many women on the circuit, and it's just kind of unusual that we'll be on the same night unless it's run by a Black woman. Do you know what I mean?
I do. So you don't get the community, you don't get that support in the same way.
Yeah, well, of course,
you did in New York.
Yeah, of course, we all know each other.
Yeah,
and we all support each other, but just our paths cross less. For me personally, that's what I found.
That makes sense, because I know Tom Ward, and I know you were at the Comedy Store with Tom Ward, Dylan Moran, Rich Hall, and Finn Taylor, but like all white guys. Like one to one be Black honest, woman.
And to be honest, you know it. And it's interesting that night, because I said to Tom was like, "Oh, will you open?" And I said, "Tom, I'm not being funny, but if I'm the only woman on this bill and I'm the only woman of color on this bill, then why am I doing heavy lifting for white season comics? I don't want to open, thanks. Have someone else open."
So what happened?
So Finn Taylor opened. I was like, good. That's the shift, isn't it? Yeah.
You know, like, because you know what I mean, is like, you know, that's no gift to open, you know, but for you to speak up and change that is when empowerment starts to change. But you're obviously not an easy gig, because you're the only woman of color.
No, do you know what?
You spoke up for yourself.
It was an easy gig, and it was a pleasure to do. I love Tom. I love everyone on that bill.
Yeah.
But for me to feel at my most comfortable, I want to be with an audience that's already been warmed up. And I just don't. But the thing is, it takes a while to know that you are good enough,
that's it,
that you can hold your own in the middle of a lineup that, and that takes time. So now I've been doing stand-up for like a decade, so I can say, do you know what, nah, I don't want to open at the Comedy Store in this lineup. Are you crazy?
Exactly.
Someone else can. Let them warm them up. They're great. Everyone's great. Let them do it.
Because that's the thing, is you can be present and powerful and like a completely incredible lightning striker if all the ingredients are right. But that takes a lot of courage often, which obviously you have, you know, to speak to, no, you know, to not comply, to not be compliant, to not do the kind of nice thing, you know. It takes courage sometimes to go, no, place me right.
Yeah, you don't want to be too accommodating and too grateful, because what it does is when you go on stage, you want to make yourself big and you want to command attention.
That's right.
And if you start questioning yourself and sort of, you know, being like, oh yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. When in your head, you've got an internal dialogue that's like, this isn't going to be the best setup for me.
That's right.
Then by the time you get on stage, you've already, you know, it affects your confidence.
That's right. I mean, how are you is that, and I know I listened to another podcast where you know, your mom was in a refuge, and that was really tough, and you had a tough time obviously with that, but how are you so like doing that and doing it so well? Is that your growth, or is that models of women around you, or how did you find how are you so connected to your own voice and your own potential and your own freedom?
I think that thank you, and it's a process, and I don't wake up every day sort of punching the sky like a little car. Woo!
Yes.
I've been in therapy for years. I also used to sort of rely on a lot of escapism because I'd get overwhelmed with anxiety. So but something that I took for granted actually when I was growing up is that I was brought up by a bunch of really kick-ass women, right? So and that didn't really do anything to rely on the male gaze too much. They didn't do too much posturing for men, right? So my gran is queer, and she's been in a same-sex relationship my whole life, and so I got to grow up with sort of two grandmothers. My gran on my dad's side had come from Jamaica and set up a whole life and bought a house and you know, raised 3 children on her own. you know, and my mum's side of the family are Jewish, my dad's side are Jamaican, and both have been led by these really strong matriarchs that
Wow.
have not pussyfooted around the fact that, and I mean this in a way that basically you shouldn't rely on men. That doesn't mean that you can't be in a really nice relationship with man and you know, enjoy love and all things soft and comforting. But in terms of looking after yourself, you should probably look to your own resources to make that happen.
So that speaks to so much, that level of free, you know, because your mum, your gran to be queer,
Yeah,
you
and my
know,
grand sister. I've got my gran was cracking up the other day because I did an interview for the baby, and obviously that's you know, that's about queer women, right? And I'd done an interview where I'd said, yeah, I grew up in a quite lesbian heavy family, and my gran and her wife sent me this voice note cracking up laughing. But yeah, so that, but also I think being like a preteen and then an early teen and living in women's aid was kind of a really interesting experience. Like, obviously at the time I didn't like, but I think for those like formative years as a woman, to see so many examples of other women having to start again and having the courage to leave when they felt most vulnerable was, you know, it did something to my brain, actually.
What did it do? Because it's interesting, isn't it? Because a lot of people wouldn't leave. Not that people shouldn't leave. Like,
it's hard.
You know, what did it do? Yeah, it's really hard to leave, you know, and society doesn't support people often who leave. So what did that do for you, witnessing all these different women and all these differences? What do you feel it did?
At the time, I was very hard on women, I guess because there was no male to blame. I was really kind of like, man, these women have made really bad choices, and that's why we're all living in one big house with a bunch of different families, and I hate it. Until I got older and made and ended up in those situations myself, and was absolutely like, how did this happen? That I really understood that in so many instances, we are the underdog, right? We're the underdog fiscally, in society, socially. But because I'd grown up around really strong women and have always been in quite female-led environments, I took it for granted, to be honest. And at that time, I held my mum quite accountable for our situation, and I held the women that I was around accountable for that situation, because there was no man to hold accountable, and I didn't have the sort of emotional knowledge to understand what was going on, you know.
That makes so much sense, doesn't it? But what's so beautiful is, like, the way you're wording that sounds like you have so much compassion for your mum now and those women.
Yeah, and you know what, just like,
and yourself.
I think it wasn't until later in life that I ended up in a similar situation, and I was like, how the fuck did this happen? I literally was like, it blew my mind. I was like, wait, what? I couldn't even compute it or accept it, because I was in such denial at what was happening.
Yeah, because of course we're going to repeat what we know, and repeat it till we don't, aren't we? We're going to go to the familiar.
Yeah, we'll go to the familiar because it seems comforting, for sure. But also, I think for me, there was a lack of understanding at how just vulnerable we are as women, and how how careful we need to be.
Yeah, and this is what's so beautiful. I just want to say thank you, you know, for your stand up, because you bring that, you know, that mixture of the vulnerability, and the strength on stage. And I do think comedy, you know, most people will never go to therapy. Most people won't, but most people will watch comedy. I do think there is a kind of, even most people won't go to the theatre.
Yeah,
not going to happen. But a lot of people will watch comedy. So I do feel like, and it's weird because in a way there's some kind of protection for actors. You know, they get trained, they get the body trained, they get voice trained. There's even an idea for therapy for actors. I know that there's therapy for comics, actually, because the lovely Barry Ferns was setting up counselling services.
Oh, I love Barry.
He's
I
gorgeous.
didn't know. I was like, wait, there's
Yes,
therapy for comics.
there
I
is.
had no idea. But you know what?
There is.
Barry Ferns is a really special soul, actually.
Yes, he is.
I spent
He
some
is.
really nice times walking down canals
Yes,
and chatting with
yes,
him.
yes.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah, me too. He's amazing. Yeah, he's thought big style, because often comics are going out there and with no thought of their own energy or protection or what they need or how they're going to manage this. And so what's beautiful about comedians is they are, like when I saw you, and you are that, it makes sense you have all these powerful women, but it also makes sense that you're able to speak to truths and vulnerability at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, you know what about that with comedy is that it takes a while. Like there's stuff that I said early on in my career that I would never say now because I didn't know. I think when you first start, you're so thirsty for laughter that
Of course.
you'll do it by any means possible. And it takes you're processing your thoughts and beliefs in front of people.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a bit of a shame now when we're held to such huge consequences for the things that we say as comics, because sometimes what we said yesterday we wouldn't say today because we're processing it in front of people on a public, in a public forum, on stage, right, live.
That's right.
And there's things that I said early on in my career before I realized the difference between people laughing because they're shocked and people laughing because something's actually funny and being thought about. So, it's quite a vulnerable place to be. And I think there should be space where a comic can kind of process what it is they're saying and also just like forgive themselves for jokes they said early on, because, you do the best you can with the knowledge that you have at the time.
I think that's such a beautiful thing that you're speaking to. And I think maybe this is even coming because, I don't know if you listen to Mark Maron's podcast.
I do. I love him. Yeah. I have done for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and he interviews this guy, does the history of comedy and, consequences and accountability for what we say, and how Mae West went to jail. Lots of comics went to, Pryor went to jail. A lot of, people complain about not being able to say stuff. And this historian, I don't know if you heard that one, was like, you do not know what it was like. People went to prison for stand-up comedy.
Yes. And you know what, actually, it's interesting you talk about Mark Maron because I really like his take on the pushback at the moment, which is primarily coming from like white male comics about you can't say anything anymore. And it's like, you can, and your job is to rise to the occasion, right? And so a woman came up to me the other day after a gig and I'd mentioned suicide, right? And I said that, basically anxiety is like depression, but with energy. Sometimes you wake up in the morning, you're like, I want to kill myself. And you've got enough in your step. And she came up to me after and she said, I'm really upset that you said that because I think her son had attempted suicide. And I said, I'm really sorry that you were offended. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm not going to take it out of my set because I don't feel like it's that specific. And I haven't had enough people coming up to me saying what you're saying. But I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. Like, I'm not going to double down and be like, yeah, well, this is part. Look, everyone's different. But I do think that there's things that I said when I was younger that I wouldn't say now. And I think it's okay to review some of your opinions and realize that they might need updating. And I think also it's not necessarily a bad thing when people say that they're upset and offended to just take it on board. I don't think it means that you have to change your set necessarily, but I do think it's worth listening to.
I think that's beautiful because it's adulting, right? Yeah. It's like, I'm not going to suddenly shrink away and go, oh, I'm so bad, but I'm going to listen to you. So I can be me, you can be you, there can be dialogue, and I'll think about it. Like he spoke to, with certain jokes he's made over the past, exactly. And he has these debates now or talks about it, and he interviewed George Clooney. And I really loved this because George Clooney was talking about standing up for people in Syria. And Mark Maron was speaking to, how this or that and the other was hard. And he was saying it's much harder for loads of other people. I'm just trying to do my bit for people I can do a bit for. And I thought, and you talk about privilege. And I thought, people who are aware talk about, I have that privilege, and or this person have this or that. And so, we can work with this. I know where, what I can do. I know what I can't do. And that's what I'm hearing is like, I'm not going to demean myself, but I'm going to listen to you.
Right. And I don't mind, like, in terms of a human coming up to me and saying that really upset me, I can say, I'm really sorry that you was upset. I ain't taking it out of my set, but I'm sorry that you were upset.
Because you don't have,
genuinely.
That's beautiful though, isn't it? Because then that's human to human, person to person, or whatever we like to say, that we can all exist. And the comic I loved what you said about the comic can exist and the comic can make mistakes. Otherwise, how does anyone grow?
I think, like with Kevin Hart a few years ago, where they were like pulling up really old tweets that he'd written, he did say that, and that was bad at the time. But he's a different person now, and
that's right.
He's apologized. He's made a point of speaking about how he felt and his growth, and we got to give him a bit of space to kind of apply that data and feedback to who he is now moving forward.
That's right. No, it's I don't know if you listened to the interview with Mark Maron and W. Kamel about the documentary on Cosby, and he was saying what was amazing about doing the documentary was he still feels the feelings that he had watching Cosby growing up, and he can still say it's terrible what Cosby did.
Yeah, I mean,
holding all these different places, on the picture. Yeah,
and I think it's important for us as humans to be able to make those distinctions.
That's it, holding all the differences, in the picture. And he said it was a real risk for him to do a documentary on Cosby, because some people were saying you're betraying the Black community, and some people are saying different things. And he put himself on the line, but he just felt it was important to talk about that's still precious to me, and that was wrong. And I want to be able to, he felt it was his duty to do it, actually.
You want to have as much sort of time and space to be able to open conversations.
That's it.
Speaking is important. And I think when we get to a point where we double down on our opinion and just say, you know what, I'm right, you're wrong, whatever it's about. I mean, I feel like now we've kind of, in lockdown where everyone was quite polarized with how they felt regarding the vaccine.
Oh yeah.
And people were really like, we were losing friends and relationships. And I remember me and my sister have some different opinions regarding that. And I remember saying to my sister, I was like, I think the biggest protest that we can make at the moment with the current situation is to make sure that we are still in contact with people that have different opinions from us. That's what's important. Like, that's the real protest right now, is kind of being like, you know what, I don't agree with what you're saying, this one thing, but then there's a bunch of things that I like about you, and you've got a different opinion to me, and it's probably important that we talk, for me and for you, right? That doesn't mean that our job is to change the other person's point of view, but at least just listen.
That is just so stunning, because this is the unity in difference. This is the non-violence in unity, because this is the thing with sometimes discussions about inclusion, which inclusion is exceptionally important, and how do we include people? But there can be inclusion where if you don't agree with me, you're out, right? And it's like which doesn't create inclusivity. And it's kind of like, I just love that. It's just really and we are entering a different time, I think. I think now there's we understand that, what we need? Connection, man. We've missed other human beings. We really need it.
Yeah, we need to be talking to strangers and stuff. Like, I'm sure everyone was exhausted with their bubble, and now it's it's time to meet other people. And I think that's one of what I see from my point of view is, especially on the comedy scene, where there's a lot of white male comics kind of pushing back and like leaning to the right or talking about how exhausting woke culture is. Ultimately, what it is that you're not well versed in having to check yourself.
That's right.
And most of us that are Black, brown, East Asian, trans, gay, queer, like we are well versed in things not going our way, and we have a language and an understanding of what that is, and being able to, I just think we're a bit more well versed in sort of holding on to who we are and our identity, even when the current is not working with our favor.
That's right. It's actually a strange privilege to be the outsider. Not that it's great, not that we don't want people to be included, but when you're the outsider, I remember a friend of mine writes a lot of sociology books, which looks at society, and it's mixed with fashion and design, and looks at what happens with fashion and design in terms of people's perspectives. And he's treated by certain communities as if he's their godfather. And I said, I saw this because he's written about certain communities. And he went, I could never be an insider and write those books. You have to be an outsider to observe things. If you're inside, you don't observe, you don't see the perspective.
Do you mean just like the cog of society? Is that
so what I mean is that I give you an example. I remember watching this series on Netflix on Jewish comedy in America, and what they said is when comedy was really starting off, it was a lot of white Christian men who were the comics, and they would laugh about slipping on a banana as a comic joke, and the Jewish comic would come in and go, why are you wasting a banana?
Right.
And they said one of the reasons why the Jewish comics had this extra is because they were the outsider. So they had this outsider's perspective,
yes,
which the insiders, who were perhaps more comfortable, perhaps more, had that privilege of being more comfortable, they were like, they said jokes from a certain perspective, which might then seem hack. The outsider comes in and then they give this different perspective. And
yes,
it's suddenly much more exciting. That's what I'm saying.
I understand what you mean, which is like the more removed you are from a situation,
you see, you got this different view. Yeah.
Right. I think it's kind of like, I guess, if you're in a play and you're playing the lead, you only know what your part is. But if you're in a situation where you're playing an extra or a bit further removed, you've got more time to watch the whole play, so you understand everyone else's different role.
You get the 360 view. And so in some ways, the Black person, the brown person, the woman, the trans person, often they're seeing more than the person who's absolutely settled in the whole scene. And there's this absolute genius and power once that person speaks, because they're seeing all these different sides of the
I think as well is that the people that are outside this inner circle are speaking whether they're being listened to or not, right? Because it's important.
That's right.
And that's, I mean, from my point of view, I can only kind of speak for myself, but I do think that sort of some of this sort of pushback, especially in comedy, I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I'm just sort of like, stop being a little bitch.
What, them? Do you mean them? Yeah. But it's so powerful to hear you. It's so. I had a granny who made telly and made films, and some of the things she did was she put first Black people in telly in the UK in soap opera, but it was very 1950s, 1960s, very racist, and it was like quite a thing to do. She had to kind of argue certain things. She put unmarried mothers in. They didn't like it in the BBC. They wanted everything a certain way, and she fought, and she was tough as nails. But I kind of feel like, and I she might not have managed it without being tough as nails. She might not have managed to make certain changes.
I think as well, like when you stand up for yourself, it doesn't feel great. It's not like how it's shown,
Yeah.
you know, in sort of like movies where it's like everyone's like fucking yeah, like it's quite isolating, it's lonely, and it makes you question yourself, you know, because you're going on something that, you know, like for instance, talking about that moment at the comedy store, right? Like you know, like I'm just kind of going, well, I'm feeling like I'm being a nuisance, but this is what's right for me. But it doesn't feel great at the time. But I know what I'm doing is the right thing for me. Is it making me feel like I'm one with this lineup? No. Do you know what I mean?
I do. So how do you prepare yourself for that? How do you? I mean, I saw what happened to my granny, and I think she learned. She kind of like what she said was. She said, "You're not telling me this isn't how life is." When it was to do with unmarried mothers, suicides, putting black people, putting things in that it wasn't how it was. It was very white. You know, it was very. She said, "You're not telling me this isn't real life," and so she said, "This is not natural." And that's how she argued it. How do you find that strength? You know, when it doesn't feel like
it's not easy. You know how? Because I've done the opposite, and that feels worse, right? Like I've been accommodating, I've let things slide. I've had people say things that I know is underhand, convoluted, but you know, like a garnish of racism, blatant racism, sexism, like you know, and I've let it slide because I didn't have the confidence to speak up, and it has plagued me for years. And now it's not worth it to me. It's not worth it. Me not feeling uncomfortable for a short amount of time, or speaking up and making maybe you feel uncomfortable for a short amount of time, because the other side of that is me hating myself.
Oh, this is amazing. That's amazing.
Like, but that's why it's not like, yeah, man, I just like wake up and I'm like, you know what?
No.
Yeah, it's like, no, I know, because I've done the opposite. I've done the opposite, and it's fucking embarrassing, man.
Yeah,
and it's
totally.
Like, it's embarrassing. You feel ashamed of yourself, and not because anyone cares, especially if you're in a room full of white people. Not that anyone cares, they don't know, but you know. And so the way to do that is to kind of, you know, be able to like seek counsel with your friends and your family and people that you trust and that want to empower you. But that's how you learn not to do that, because you do it and you're like, you just fucking hate yourself for it, and it's really damaging.
No, it's so beautiful, but there's still like a powerful shift, which obviously I know you've spoken to getting therapy and you've spoken to having community in New York, like the Black women comics, and you have them here, but you've spoken to it being like able to hang out in New York. So I imagine,
know what, not even just like not even like Black female comic, but just like people that you relate to, right? So just like just being able to, you know, just like respect some friendly competition and just having a sense of community, so you don't feel like you're the only one in the room.
Amazing. So does that mean like you know that there's support for you to keep being more you and keep being more you, kind of thing?
You know what it is, right? You know, like when someone, you know, like these like subtle little gaslights that just happen in society every day.
Yeah,
right?
They call them microaggressions.
Microaggressions, yeah. When you get to like look at someone else and be like, yeah, that's happening, right? Can you see that? Well, should we say something? That doesn't necessarily mean the person has to be a woman or a Black woman, or you know what I mean? Like someone who's just like you, but it could be, you know, like for me, there was times where, you know, I've had that with Catherine. He's like a white, wealthy woman. Do you know what I'm saying? Where I'm like, what the... And then there'd be times where
she's got some she's received
it's not even like when you can see that someone's like got your back. That's what it is. It doesn't necessarily, you know, I've had that, like I'm doing a show at the moment, and I did we did a pilot for this show that I'm writing, and we've got a director, and it's a straight white director, male director. And there was a few times where we'd be in kind of casting rooms and chatting to, you know, actors or whatever, and I'm there as a writer and also the creator and also an actor. And there were times where just like there'd be a man in the room and he'll just talk to the director and just kind of cancel me out and be asking him questions that I can answer. And he would just bring me into the conversation, and I'd be
the director
thanks. Yeah, I'd just be like, thanks. Not that, look, I can stand up for myself. That's not an issue. But there's times where you just think, I can't be asked, to be honest.
No. This is the seams, isn't it, that makes life so much smoother and makes it doable to have that courage to go, I'm not opening, right? If you know there's supports on the way, if it's not all hard work, right? It's
right. Yeah. And sometimes you're just like, do you know what? I can't, like, this isn't worth my energy right now. And someone else is just like, yeah, don't worry, I got it. And it's like, nice.
Helpful, because you don't want to be the captain and rowing the boat and operating the machine. And do you know what I mean? Like, it's like sometimes
it's exhausting, man.
It's exhausting. You know, I hope you don't mind me asking, because it's just because you're in New York for years doing comedy. Did you meet Dave Attell?
Yeah, I did. And you know what? I didn't like meet him to talk to, but he'd come into the Stand comedy club quite a bit. And I was about to go on stage once, and he'd come in and they were like, oh, he's going on first. And I actually had a bit of a meltdown. I was like, how am I going to follow this guy?
I know. Oh my God.
Yeah. He's really good. He's amazing. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, because I heard he's very kind as well. And
he's really nice.
Yeah.
Like very warm. I didn't speak to him.
Right.
But at times when I've been at gigs where he's there, primarily at the Stand, he's nice, you know, like he's not, like you don't feel inadequate around him.
Brilliant. That's what I heard. And it kind of speaks to, you know, people who are the best often, not always, but sometimes they've, like you were speaking to Gloria Steinem, you know, that these people have grown and developed and shifted and got boundaries and limits, but they're also kind.
Yeah.
They're also nice, you know, which is, you know, let me check out then, because you're obviously doing a show, because I was wondering whether you watched Alma's Not Normal, Sophie Willan. Have you seen that show?
I've only seen one episode, and I actually I tried out for a part, which I think Tanya Moore got, because, you know, the best woman wins. And
bless you.
No, it's true, man. She's a fine actor. She's very funny, and she deserves all the flowers, right? She's been working really hard.
That's nice.
But I remember reading part for it, and I was like, oh, this is really good. And I'm aware of like what she does, but I haven't watched the series.
No, because I was just curious whether, you know, is that current? You're writing something and you're in? Is that based on your life, or is it?
Yeah. Of course it is. Everything is, isn't it? You just mind so much. You mind so much that you're like, wow, I need to get out and do some more living so I can continue to do this mind.
I know. How do you do that? How do you balance? You know, because obviously, right, you've got this HBO show, you've got the Duchess, you've got stand up, you've got, you know, and you're traveling around with stand up. Are you doing Edinburgh?
I'm not doing Edinburgh this year.
No.
I was just supporting Catherine Ryan on tour, which has been fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how do you, and you're doing a show which you've written and you're in, and
how
do you?
I mean, do you know what? I'm trying to work it out. Do you know what? I'm not sure if I'm doing the best job of it at the moment, because I'm doing kind of press for the baby. I'm writing in the middle of the day, and I'm doing gigs at night, and I don't think I'm acing all three of these things. So I don't know, actually. I think there comes a point where you probably just are gonna, like for me, I feel like I'm gonna have to accept that I can't spin all these plates, and in order for me to be really good, I'm gonna have to, you know, eliminate a couple of things and concentrate on one thing.
But
I don't know how. Not well at the moment.
Well, I mean, I love Stuart Lee, and I remember him saying, you know, when he had kids, because he was used to being able to take like a long time over making a show, you know, but he'd make these really, really intellectual shows which skipped half the audience. And then he got kids, and he only got half an hour here, half an hour there to write. And then he'd do his meta, you know, his meta comedy, like all these meta concepts, but he'd then write down the accessible bits and relate to the audience, whether they got bits or not. And suddenly he went huge because people could relate, not just to the intellectual nerdy comedy bit, but he made bits more accessible. And what I suppose I'm speaking to is, I suppose you're learning on the job, aren't you? These things are coming in and you're learning how to manage your life at the same time as doing it. Something's in the learning curve of it all, isn't it?
And I think at the moment I'm struggling because I'm doing a certain amount of press, and I don't normally have Instagram on my phone and stuff like that, and I've fallen into a really weird kind of thing of like a sort of like compulsion dopamine hit with reading reviews. I'm not someone who would like normally Google themselves, but there's something about me not being me in this, for this acting role. Obviously the show's out in America, where I've got into sort of doing press, reading reviews and looking on Instagram. And actually what I'm finding is, in order to do a show like what I'm writing, is I need to be able to let my imagination flourish and basically do some like long form thinking. And I'm kind of fucking that up a bit by having these little ego hits. So I don't really know how to move forward with, I mean, I know how basically I've got to stop checking my phone and going on Instagram and stuff, but it's this weird like it's this weird like dopamine hit at the moment, which isn't, there's no foundation in it, it's not nourishing long term, it's quite distracting, but it makes you feel good on these little hits, and it's making it quite tricky. I've got to find a way to remove myself from that so I can so my imagination can flourish, because right now I'm getting a bit centered around like me.
Well, it makes a lot. I mean, what's it like when you're on that, when you're Instagram getting the dopamine hit? What's it like?
It feels like it's like smoking a cigarette, right? Which weirdly I've just picked up again. And I think it's I'm talking to my therapist about it, and she was like, they're like compulsions. I was like, yeah, it's kind of like the same sort of loop. Which is like, how can I make myself feel better really quickly, but it doesn't have any long-term benefit, but it's just enough to distract you.
Got it. So it's like short-term pleasure rather than long-term pleasure. It's like a short-term. So
it's short-term pleasure as opposed to long-term satisfaction and nourishment that takes more effort and more focus.
Got it. So it makes sense though, doesn't it, with when you're saying that, you know, I can't remember the plan of the day, but it was something like afternoon was writing, nighttime was stand-up, something
morning
else
I've been doing like press stuff.
Right. It makes sense. It sounds like there's not much room for the long-term pleasure at the moment. It makes sense that part of you is resourcing with short-term pleasure.
Yeah, exactly.
Because sometimes if we can make sense of it and befriend it and like not put it down, not shame it, and like make sense of it, it can be like, there could be another option, maybe like you said, with looking at your day and also being compassionate. Maybe right now, just for today, you're doing the best with how that you've only got 2 minutes maybe for a little bit of short-term pleasure, maybe. And to be kind about that, and then maybe there might be more room for how would I create the satisfying? Do you know what I mean?
And I think it's like the instant gratification, you know, when you're doing press, you're being quite like, nice. And it's a bit like doing a modeling job. And then of course you want to speak well of the show and you want to give it the best kind of start it can have, right? And then stand up, also instant gratification. Like people either laugh or they don't.
Of course.
And then I think switching to like long form thinking in the middle of the day is just not, it's not happening at the moment. I mean, it is, but it's taken a lot more kind of, it's a bit more of a battle.
Well, it makes sense, doesn't it? And sometimes like maybe, you know, it's like if I can't think, oh, how would I do that? Maybe someone else can help me slow down and go, okay, do you know what I mean? And make sense, help me make, you know, like, because it sounds like you've put lots of people in place for lots of things. So it's kind of, so maybe first thing is just like, oh man, I'm looking for short-term hits at the moment because my day is so packed.
Yeah, I'm literally thinking that as I go to the co-op and go and get a packet of fags.
But it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does
make sense that's at the moment, because what they say is like if you can get to the point where you can put more well-being in, it might change. But maybe right now that sounds like a packed day. It doesn't sound easy to have the
I do think so. Sometimes having like an intellectual understanding of why you're doing things emotionally can be a massive hindrance to actually, you know, taking how you feel on board, because you kind of go, yeah, I get it, I know why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And you think that's enough, and it's like, that's not enough.
Then there's more stages. That's
exactly
right. That's why that's stage one.
Yeah.
But not punishing, I think, is quite helpful to start the stage, because if I'm in the polarization of I shouldn't, no I will, no I wouldn't, do you know what I mean? It's like
then you can never get off the hamster wheel, can you?
But you're right, that's stage one. Then you got to work with it, haven't you? Kind of.
Yeah. Baby steps.
Now what you know, being back in Britain, because you were doing stand-up in New York, does it feel like you're pulled to New York, or you feel like, no, things happening here, so this is where I am? Or, well, HBO's in America, so that's interesting. So you're in a way across.
I know, it's weird. I think I mean it's out in America first, and then it'll be out here on Sky in July. So I feel like I mean, although I've lived in New York for most of my adulthood, I never was someone who would say I was a New Yorker. I've always felt like such a Londoner. But the truth is, culturally, definitely more so a New Yorker than I was a Londoner. And I think, you know, when you live in a different country, you can kind of sort of coast on, you almost become a sort of caricature of your identity and how it started. And so coming back, I've just had to I've just been out of touch, but I sound like such a Londoner. I never lost my accent. And I guess I've just been getting reacquainted with things. There's a lot of things that I didn't get at first, sort of culturally, and definitely in stand-up, because the beat of stand-up comedy is different here. And when we first started, you was like, oh, you take up a lot of room on stage. And I think that is a very sort of New York trait as far as doing comedy. And so coming back, and also we're just so classist here as well, you know, there's kind of, you know, there's like that happening as well. So yeah, it's just taken a bit of a readjustment and just to like reconnect.
Because you found it wasn't so classist in New York, different?
It's not a classist, it's just not a classist country. It is new money is new money. There isn't really old money. I guess the closest thing that you would go to old money would be, you know, like Jackie Onassis or something like that, or the Kennedys, or, you know, even Trump, although with all his ridiculous wealth, is like, that's new money. New money is, I feel like in this country, we respect an old title and zero money over actual money.
Oh yeah,
and so and we also get to hide racism in class, you know, and that's not really the case there. I don't necessarily think that America is more racist than England. It's just they're a lot more bloody blatant about it, and they've got less history to cover it up with. And then also as a British person, because they love Britain, especially in the South, I think that my Britishness superseded my blackness in a lot of ways. So there was a lot of privilege where that was concerned. So, you know, so I think there were some things that I just had an easier ride of it out there because I was British.
So interesting. And you know, like things like Bridgerton, obviously, you know, like where they've cast Black people in roles that you wouldn't have had in the past. And I don't know how you feel about that, or whether you'd want to be in Bridgerton, or whether that would not speak to you. Or
I mean, I think I haven't. I'm aware of what Bridgerton is, and I think that and I know that people love it, and I think it's great. I think what might be slightly, I know it was spoken about in the last season that when a show, especially a British show, is hailed and given a loads of credit for having a diverse cast, then I think we also have to look at the complexion of that cast. And I think that a lot of times, especially in this country, where someone of my complexion identifies as being mixed race and not black, that you're only showing a part of the spectrum and you're getting all the credit, when actually a lot of the darker skinned actors had sort of story arcs and were kind of on the periphery. They weren't in the central cast. Actually, in the central cast, everyone is light skinned. And I think for a country like England, that's all its history is in colonialism, that is good. But I mean, to have a diverse cast, but how diverse is it? It's also
such a good point, because like I told you, in the model agent, I worked for Model Swan many years ago, and I interviewed people from Model Swan recently talking about diversity, because if you look at Model Swan now, I worked there in the 80s, late 80s, and if you look, and there was Alec Weck, as you know.
She's a friend of mine.
Yeah, amazing. Well, so she was part of the change in a way. I mean, you had Iman in the 70s, but you know what I mean? It was very...
Yeah, but I mean, even with Alec, I mean, she's a friend of mine. And when I left London that first time round and I went back to New York, I moved in with Alec, actually. She let me live in her house. And it back then, it wasn't like she was the start of change. There was Alec at one end of the spectrum and there was Naomi Campbell at the other end of the spectrum. And when I went to New York, I got a lot of jobs and was cast as the black model in the campaign. And really and truly, there's still a fair amount of racism in that, because I'm super light-skinned.
Got it.
I'm not fully black.
Got it.
And for me to be representing everyone that's black the right way to, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's just
totally.
kind of like, I don't know, man. Like, I think like I just see a lot of shows where
it's a good point.
Yeah, where they're celebrated in this country for having like a really diverse cast, and I'm like, but everyone in this cast who you're saying is black, which they are also mixed race. So like, also show the full spectrum.
Yes, very good point. Very good point. No, it's a journey, isn't it? All of this. I mean, I'm grateful for the changes, but like you said, sometimes the changes, they aren't thought through. Sometimes it's not.
I think you got to start somewhere, and I think that you just got to be able to say as well that, like, when people are patting themselves on the back as well, you got to be like, look, colorism is a thing, man. Like, I'm gonna have. Alec Weck, amazing. Couldn't have been just like a better friend to me at times. But like, I did a lot more commercial jobs than Alec, and I'm nowhere near the model she is, right? And now she's having a moment where she's really getting the flowers for her hard work in the fashion industry. But when we first started, or when I started, which was a few years after Alec, Alec would make most of her money in campaigns, but on shows, right? For shows. Whereas someone like me would come in and do loads of commercial work. You just kind of got to look at, like,
totally.
Some of these things need a little bit of...
it's all...
I feel like as well, maybe because of the perspective that I'm coming from, I should like, I can only speak from where I see it, and obviously someone else who's had a different experience is going to have a different feeling. So I don't want to talk for anyone else, but just like for me personally, these are things that I think about, I guess, to be mindful to like check my own privilege, which I know
it's so beautiful, it's so beautiful to do that, because it's like you can be authentic and you can speak to that. And so where some people might miss things, you know things and you can see those layers. And it's like, I'm a sex therapist, for example, and there's something called sexual privilege, which is people who would easily meet a partner. And there are people who don't have sexual privilege. Wouldn't be so easy for them to meet someone or have a partner. Or some people mentally, they probably shouldn't, because it would cause them so much stress. So like, I just appreciate what you're saying. You can speak to noticing the light-skinned, dark-skinned, you know all about this. You've
the bias.
It's bias, exactly.
It's been like, it's a bias in the that's definitely been in the fashion industry as far as commercial work, and I think that's changing now. But I guess like I just definitely wouldn't want to be speaking for anyone but myself, because
that's also, you know, very, very appropriate. And you are speaking, right? Because that's the other thing. For bad to happen, only good people need to shut up. That's
right.
You know what I'm saying?
You know, like even what you're saying about like sexual privilege, is that like that's all, you know, coming from a modeling background, you kind of like, my perspective on the privilege that I had in my 20s and now at 41, I'm like, I didn't, because I chose to like not take it on board and not make it a thing, didn't stop it from existing, right? And it's kind of now, as you know, gravity exists and I'm getting older, I'm like, oh man, like, oh, I can kind of you know, have to take that on board as well.
You get it. But what's beautiful, I have to say, just because I'm familiar with the modeling world a little bit and worked in the modeling world, and what's beautiful is, and I'd love you to speak to this, is somewhere you really took on really growing you and growing your voice, whereas some models, you know, and I met them, some of them were in their 60s and they still look like they were 20 for some reason. Some people forever look whatever. And because people will just drop everything to kind of stare at some people, they didn't have to grow a character till much, much later. They didn't have to grow because they were so beautiful. Everything would happen for them around them. Do you know?
Well, we as a society hold beauty to really high regard. And I wonder now if that's, you know, where I think when I was modeling, tweakments and surgery wasn't where it is now. And I think that's why someone like Kylie Jenner is a billionaire, right? Because what she shows is that beauty in Western society standards is accessible, right? So if you like, when I was modeling, it was kind of a thing of like, you were just born like that, right? You were a bit of a genetic freak. But now our biggest models, like Bella Hadid, and, you know, they're people that we've watched get surgery. Why we love the Kardashians, even though we absolutely rinse them for their wealth, what we're fascinated by is the fact that they've changed the way they look, and that is possible, right? And I don't think it was decades before.
Wow.
So there's something quite fascinating with how beauty was probably seen a decade or 2 decades ago to how you see it now, right?
So there's like an equality. Now, there's an equality with in some ways with seeing people work on themselves in that way.
I think there's an accessible currency with beauty now. That's what I would say. And so when you see young women in their 20s and they have a similar aesthetic, you know, they've paid for that aesthetic. And I guess beyond that, we can speak about Western society and how a lot of white women are looking like, you know, that they're a different ethnicity, but that's like a different sort of conversation, although it's relevant. But I think at the base level, what's interesting is that beauty is accessible in society's baseline standards now. And I wonder if that means that we still hold it on such high regard when we see someone else who's stunning and beautiful, or if it's because it's more accessible, it's more about how we feel about ourselves. I don't know. I'm like watching this happen from afar as someone who is not in their 20s anymore, you know, but who definitely had that experience of getting a lot of attention for how they looked.
So interesting. And, you know, I was curious because you're so generous in your podcast, you know, and you spoke about your agency getting you to have Botox, and you spoke about lessening the Botox for acting because you need your face to move. So does Botox like stop if you stop doing it for a bit and so you can act and move your face?
Botox doesn't last. It only lasts for a couple of months. And what it does is means that you can't, you know, frown. And so like, for instance, I can raise my eyebrows, but I can't really frown, but I can raise it. But I've been to someone who's pretty skilled, and so you can get some movement happening. When you're acting, I personally, my character, like that, I just wouldn't do anything like that while I was playing a role, because I'm not being me. My personal preference is irrelevant if you're playing a role of someone.
Got it. And how would you, I mean, obviously, like, you're younger than me, so it's like there's all these different times and different eras, but like, how do you feel about, like, you know, growing older or getting wrinkles or embracing that? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it, does it...
It's interesting. I started to feel that I never thought, as a model, definitely, I never felt that caught up in how I looked, but I definitely had a feeling that I was letting myself down by aging. You know what I mean? Like, as a woman, I was just like, I didn't realize, even as someone who's modeled and kind of came out unscathed, right? I would definitely have moments where I was just like, because I had Botox from such a young age, I'd never seen myself sort of age, right?
Yeah,
so when I started doing acting jobs and I didn't, I could separate myself from, like, Natasha, who I play, who's just like, she's very expressive and she's very, you know, like, she's pent up and stressed out.
So she doesn't have to be beautiful. Is that what you're saying? You could separate, do you mean?
I can separate how I feel about myself from this character that I'm playing, because I'm like, this works for her.
Got it.
But there were times where I would sort of like look at myself and just be like, I'm really not into the way I look. Now, I know for my age, I look good for my age, especially considering the lifestyle that I've had. But it's just weird, man, how, like, society will play some tricks on you, and you'll do it to yourself by not having a realistic relationship of time. And one of the reasons why I try to be open about Botox is because I don't want to do a disservice to, like, younger women looking at me being like, oh, you look great. I'm like, yeah, no, this isn't just me.
Yeah, like, you're being authentic. You're being authentic.
Well, you're not, because if I was being authentic, I wouldn't be doing anything. But you know what I mean? Like, I at least want to be open about how inauthentic I am. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally. No, it's you know, thank you so much, Michelle, for chatting with me, because I think this, you know, like, internalized racism, internalized homophobia, internalized all these things, but this internalized shouldn't age for women, right? And perhaps it's there for men and for everybody, I don't know, but this internalized beauty, age, do you know, I think there's something you're speaking to here. And I think it hasn't necessarily been really, maybe it is really opened up, but I think there's something in this that women have been thinking about. What do I look like before? How am I feeling? You know, what do I look like?
You know what?
do I, you know?
I think that, so I was modeling before social media really kicked off. But what I'm seeing people experience now, young people, to me, is very much like how it was modeling, because they've got filters. I remember this moment where I realized I was just watching all of these people walking around holding a phone up while they were on FaceTime walking down the street. And I was like, wow, everyone all of a sudden
is
aware of
yeah.
camera angles,
that's right,
and lighting and how you look best, right?
You're so right.
And then on top of that, we have filters.
That's
on top
right.
of that, we got amazing cameras on our iPhones. And what's happening is that we're having a warped relationship with our image. So the way I feel now is probably a couple of years ahead to the self-loathing that this next generation is gonna be dealing with, because it's just I've seen airbrushed versions of myself before people were having filters on cameras and social media. I would walk down the street and see huge posters of myself, and I was like, I don't look like that. But I feel like I'm letting people down who see me in real life, that I can't.
Oh yeah,
compete.
all the pressure for meeting you in real life. Oh my God.
And I think that is exactly what every person is going through now with social media, filters, tweakments, Instagram. Like we're all doing it. So how I feel now is probably a pretty decent precursor to how other people that are in their 20s now are going to feel by the time they hit my age. I imagine that by the time they get to 41, there'll be even sort of better tweakments in place to, you know, sort of prolong the, well, not prolong, but, you know, kind of shun the evils of gravity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's probably everyone's going to be feeling like this. All these young people that are coming up now.
It's really interesting what you're saying. Everyone's a lot of people are models in that sense. A lot of people, you know.
Well, everyone's going through that process. That was something that only models went through, but now everyone is experiencing that head fuck.
I know. It's weird. It's weird. You are so right. And so, you know, obviously you're in the middle of a lot happening, right? You're in America, you're here, you're doing stand-up, you're with Catherine, you're in shows on, you know, and thank you for talking to me. So is there like, and obviously at some level, it sounds like you'd like some kind of shift with space, but do you feel like it's now all, and of course you keep having to manage like you did with the Comedy Store, you keep having to, you know, speak up for things, but is there a feeling like it's all now flowing, or is there a feeling like, actually, I'd love it if that happened or this happened? Or
no. It feels like it's flowing.
Yeah.
But with that just comes like anxiety, man.
Cool.
Just anxious. I just feel anxious, like it in a way that I didn't feel when I was worried about money and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And also I just was someone that was way more motivated and sort of like when my back's against the wall and when everything's kind of going your way, like I'm not totally sure how to adjust to this setting. But it's good. It's good
point. It's such a good point, because people get so kind of like, you know, waiting until they get to the point where I imagine you might be now. And actually it's like, well, how does this work? How do you operate in this space, right? It's like,
I'm used to working in a bit of a like, you know what, fuck you, I'll show you. And this ain't that. This is like,
no, they want you. You're wanted.
Yeah. It's just the, you know, you're having a little moment. I don't think these things last, but I don't. It feels good in some ways and quite nerve-wracking in others, just because your anxiety spikes. And
totally.
And also, I think in this sort of stage, there's like less people to chat to about it without sounding like an absolute
no that's right. Do you have like mentors or people that you can see have gone before you that you go, oh, you know, how does this work?
And also just friends, you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be in the same situation as me, but just people that you trust.
Exactly. So they can kind of go, oh, this is what I did in that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So in a way, you're kind of like in the boat, and the boat's on the water, and now you're like, okay, I gotta.
Where are we going?
Yeah.
I made such a fuss about getting in the boat.
Right.
I've packed everything, and I don't know where the fuck I'm meant to be going to.
So it's kind of all good, but it's a little unknown.
Yeah. And you kind of go for a sort of feeling of like, you want to like do the best by yourself.
Yeah.
As in like you want to sort of honor yourself,
Yeah.
but also you're sort of grappling with like lack of self-worth and all these kind of things that just make you think, oh, fuck it, I can't be asked.
Absolutely. And it's just so normal, isn't it? And understandable. And it's so beautiful you speak to this. Thank you so much for doing this with me, because I think that's the thing, is that, people fantasize that when I'm there, then sorted. And actually, when I'm there, that's when the real stuff happens, in a way, because you're having to deal with, not do I have enough money to pay that bill, but actually, how do I handle the feelings, the anxiety, and the unknown?
I was talking to my therapist about this, because I was like, nothing's urgent right now, and now I've kind of got out this like fight or flight mode. I sort of feel a bit like, that feather in the opening of Forrest Gump. I'm just like, what am I, is someone gonna, who's right. Is it like, what happens now? Exactly. You know what I mean?
I totally do, because it's like, for a long time, for most people, for one reason or another, they're in survival, and then they get to another place. Many people, not every, many people get to another place, and it's like, oh, dry land. Hang on a second. I'm used to that. Dry land.
It's really hard to make sure that you don't create chaos, because it's
so tempting.
Because you know what to do in those scenarios.
Well, you're used to that chemical concoction, aren't you? You're used to that chemistry, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a danger zone. Do you know what I mean? But it's good. Look, these are nice problems to have. You know what I mean?
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And thank you for this, because you're speaking, I think, to, stuff that's so important for people to realize, is that, like, this is the humanness, isn't it? That actually when we get what we want, actually, it's kind of like, how do we be with us?
When you get to that point of like, oh, show them, and then you get there, you're just sort of like, oh shit, you know what I mean?
It's quite vulnerable. It's quite vulnerable.
It's just a bit of a dangerous place. That's why I was saying, with this sort of these little dopamine hits with like going on the net, I'm like, this isn't sustainable, and it's probably not good sort of fertilizer for the ego, but no. You know what I mean? But here we are.
But the funny thing is, you're naming it. Right? I know, like, there's some other stages of the change, right? But like, sometimes we don't even realize, do we? We're going along going, oh my God, I've been, I don't look at Instagram much, because I got swallowed by it. Like, I don't know how it swallows you. It's probably designed to swallow you.
No, that is absolutely designed.
I didn't stop. And I'm like, what's going on? I'm not even into this. And I'm,
so it never ends. That's why
there's no end. That's it. And then there's videos, and then there's people who add music, and then there's people who add words, and it's like,
do you know what I think it's like? Like when you're at the bus stop and it's got one of those things that tell you the time. It keeps on going from 1 minute to due, 1 minute to due, and you've been standing there for 20 minutes, and there's nothing in you that goes, I should just walk now, because you're like, but it says due. It's 1 minute now. It's due. It's just
that is exactly what it's like. And but sometimes I think we do this stuff till we realize we're doing this stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, sometimes it's so unconscious, isn't it, that you it swallows you up, doesn't it?
They're compulsions to hold your attention, so you don't think for yourself.
Exactly. And but Michelle, thank you so much for your generosity, for your time.
Welcome. It's been really nice talking to you.
So lovely to talk.
I hope I haven't done too much absolute waffling.
It's been amazing and beautiful, and really, really, really generous, because you've spoken to so much, which is so important, and your authenticity and openness is just gold. And I can see why you're a star, and more's unfolding, because it's understandable why other people don't know how to be as authentic as you give
yourself to others to be. It's difficult for people, but you are that. You're so authentic. So thank you
me
very
way
much.
too much credit, but thank you. I appreciate it.
It's really good, really good.
Send me a link for this.
I will send you it. I will send you it. It'll be quite soon. And thank you very, very much. And more power to you. It's going to keep going. So
thanks so much.
Good
luck with the podcast and everything. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. Bye. Have a lovely day. Bye.
So that was Michelle de Swarte. What an incredible human being. So embodied, so in depth, so authentic, so real. It was a real privilege to talk to her. And, you know, I wrote to her out of the blue after seeing her show. So I'm a complete stranger to her. And she gave me that opportunity. And so she also, she's caring and sharing with, you know, other people out there, which I'm very, very, very grateful to her for. I hope you found that inspiring. I really did. I think it's really amazing when our heroes, and she's a hero to me because I just adore what she's doing, you know, share with us so authentically and say, you know, there is a path and you can walk it and don't have to be perfect, but you have to show up and learn things, you know. I just really love that. It's all these mentors and guides and the way they share things. So I hope that this gave something to you if you did listen in and if you enjoyed it. I really did, and I hope that you look out for her shows, her comedy shows, and also the Duchess and the Baby and her own show which she's writing. So yeah, I think Michelle is a natural icon and superstar, and I'm sure we're going to see more and more and more of her, and sending you love, Michelle. You are brilliant.